And welcome back, everybody, to the Bitcoin Business Bureau. I'm your host, as always, Litecoin Leader. Now, today is a remarkable day for my theory on economic relativity. It's the fifth of 5 installments. It's what I call summation. We've covered 4 different topics, and this is going to be the last one. So I will link video number 4 up in here so you can go backwards, and then eventually there'll be a playlist for all 5. But I started with valuation, which is also pricing. Then we went over inflation, then correlation, then perception, and now summation. I'm going to go over a few different popular theories of what's going on in the global economy, and then I'm going to provide my own take on both of them, and then I'll give a little bit of my own viewpoint of where we're at. Again, this is just one guy on the internet. This is not financial advice. This is just me postulating where we are in the economy and seeing how it impacts both the world and also cryptocurrency, not necessarily in that order. So here we go. Just a quick reminder that nothing in this video is considered financial advice. I am not your financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Seek out your own advice and do your own diligence, do your own research. So the first theory I'm going to discuss is Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory. Now, he's been touting this theory for a couple of years, and I think he's pretty well versed in it, and he's talked to Anthony Pompliano in a video, which I'll share here. And I'll also share another interview with George Gammon, also talking about the dollar milkshake theory. There's not a lot of videos right now on it because there's a lot of things that are up in the air. He was talking about it a lot last year. He's touched on it since. I think George's video was in May. So that's only a few months ago. So that's probably the most current discussion on it. Again, both videos will be made available to you. I'll try to link them here as well. But the theory basically says this, and that is the US dollar is the strongest fiat currency on the planet, mostly because everybody owes debt to the US in US dollars. And they continue to borrow or have borrowed a lot of money against or in terms of the US dollar because they wanted to invest in the US dollar as the strongest economy on the planet. And even though that from a US perspective, it didn't look that strong. It's stronger than Europe. It's stronger than Japan. Even China was buying our bonds. And there's all this debt that needs to be serviced throughout the world. So at some point, it's going to come due. That bill is going to come due, and the other countries are going to have to pay back to the US all the money that they borrowed, otherwise default. So it's a solid theory. It's an interesting theory. I think there's a couple of holes in it, and let me go over them next. Okay, so here's some of the holes that are in the dollar milkshake theory that need to be addressed. And part of it, I think the number one is that they assume that it's all going to be a US currency or a fiat currency solved problem. And they don't really put enough credibility, or Brent doesn't, onto assets appreciating, and particularly other currencies and hybrids like Bitcoin, which are considered both assets and currencies in some circles. So, for example, what if? I like to play what if sometimes. So what if other countries decide to get out of the system where they have to pay, where they have to keep borrowing against the US debt? They stop using the SWIFT system. We've already talked about that already. There's been, even within the SWIFT system, the dollar is not the dominant currency. It's now the euro. And now outside of the SWIFT system, more transactions happen than inside the SWIFT system for the first time since the SWIFT system was introduced. The SWIFT system is just a pretty acronym it's a telecommunications financial network for transferring funds between countries. And when the US puts out sanctions, they kick people out of that system. So a lot of countries have said, I don't want to play in this system anymore. I'm going to make different contracts with other countries and settle them in other denominated currencies. Now, clearly right now, they're still using fiat currencies, but they're starting to consider other means of exchange. The gold is still not there. I mean, a lot of gold has been repatriated and brought back to China and Japan and other countries that had in Europe. That's been going on since the 60s, and that's part of the reason we went off the gold standard. But for right now, the theory of the dollar milkshake theory, the driving force is that everybody owes in US dollars, and the US dollar is still the strongest thing that's out there. So here's my main point about the dollar milkshake theory, and this is probably the biggest takeaway. The theory is surrounded upon, or one of the main prongs of the theory is that the US dollar is the main currency that people need to pay back debts. But it neglects the fact that other assets can appreciate beyond the US dollar. Part of what Brent says, and this is probably very true, is that the debt is not going to outpace gross domestic product because there's been so many shutdowns across the globe that there's not a lot of production going on right now. So the production will never catch up to surpass the debts. So sometimes when you borrow, you can produce more than the debt that you have, so that you can actually, your income from selling your goods will be able to pay back on the debt. That's part of the reason why you borrow. That's not happening right now because everything's shut down. So the issue here, and I understand what he's saying, is that the US dollar is going to have to be the currency that all these debts are paid back. But what if, I play what if often, what if these other countries invest in other assets, or they start using other assets like Bitcoin in El Salvador as the main currency? Then they're going to have a lot of reserves kept in a different system, in an appreciating asset. And then they'll be able to borrow against that asset and repay their debts when the US dollar hyperinflates, and that's what they're all expecting, because the United States keep printing money in quantitative easing. So that $1 trillion debt, or whatever they have, let's say a country owes $500 billion. That $500 billion may feel like $50 billion a few years from now due to quantitative easing and hyperinflation. So but if they're in Bitcoin, the Bitcoin is growing or maintaining its buying power with other assets, and the dollar just keeps going up. So if Bitcoin goes from 50,000 to 500,000, you can invest your money now in Bitcoin, flip it back to US dollars in a few years from now, pay off your debt, and you still have 90% of your assets back. So that's really the answer. If the assets are going to go up 10x relative to what you have to pay back your debt in US dollars, why wouldn't you do that? So that's the hole in the theory. And it's not just Bitcoin. It could be gold or silver or other appreciating assets, but the most predominant one, the most likely one is going to be Bitcoin. And that we're going to see Exhibit A, the first example of what's going to happen with El Salvador. And it's other countries like Cuba and Paraguay are considering adopting Bitcoin as their global, or their reserve currency, their national currency. It's only going to get more interesting as they leave the SWIFT / US dollar system for an appreciating asset. So that's my take on the dollar milkshake theory. And now we'll go into a second theory next. So here's the second theory I want to discuss in our summation, which is the dollar Whippet theory put forth by the Economic Ninja, which builds on the Mike Maloney basic cycle of inflation, deflation, and then hyperinflation. And let me go over all three of those and how they work, and then I'll talk about my personal take on them. And I think Economic Ninja is pretty dead on this. But I also want to point out where we're at. So phase one is inflation. We've seen this already. We've seen that prices are going up. We see that the government is stimulating the economy by printing more money, injecting it, and doing the best that they can to improve liquidity, to have more people and to have more cash to go spend it. The problem with that is that we have supply shortages in several things, and those prices are going up very high because people are not working. We're not producing as many goods. We're not producing as many, pieces of lumber, which we're going to get back to lumber in a moment. There's less meat or cattle because some plants are closed. All these different reasons. Cars are an issue for supply chain. There's issues there. So we're going to see the inflation come, and we've already pretty much seen that happen already. So then comes a period called deflation, and deflation is a little bit harder to comprehend, but it works like this. And is that first you have money, you feel rich, right? You're getting money for free and you want to spend it. But after a while, there's not much you want to spend it on. And now you're saying, well, my job is closed, and they're starting to lower the unemployment is not as high as it used to be. The stimulus ran out. The jobs are not what I want to go do because I'm used to just sitting at home collecting money. For whatever reason, you want to hold money personally and not go out and spend. That's a personal decision. Secondly, businesses are not getting loans to go and spend because banks are tightening. And that's the bigger problem, is that the banks are now available. The money is available for banks to go out and lend. That's how new money is created in the economy. And both those two factors increase the velocity of money for the economy, so that the money keeps churning. Business, like the goods are bought and sold, people get paid, money keeps flowing. But so banks are part of the problem. The reason that banks aren't lending is because when they make new money by making a new loan, they have to sell that on a secondary market. Those secondary markets are pretty much dried up, and there's no one buying these loans. They are like, oh, I don't want to do any more loans anymore. So now the banking is holding up the velocity of money in the economy. So that's going to lead to deflation. So we go through two phases so far. First, you have inflation, where everybody's got extra money because of the stimulus package, the extra incentives, the more money that's being printed, the quantitative easing. They have more money to spend, and there's still goods to buy. So they go out and they buy things, and they're at home, so they might buy luxury items. They might buy an Xbox to play games at home because they're getting paid to be at home. And that's happened in 2020 for certain. And they spend on luxury items. They get that Netflix subscription. They get on Hulu as well, playing entertainment while they're at home, order food to be delivered. Everybody seems to think everything is fine. Then we start to see a supply chain shock, where we don't have chips for cars, truckers. There's not many trucks driving. There's not many planes flying. That we have ports being closed. Goods start to dry up, and then we have banks. Banks start to feel this pressure, even though they have the money to loan. They get nervous because their job is not just to loan money out to people, but also to sell those loans. And those two events create more money in the economy, and also increase the velocity of money through the economy. Money velocity is a big important thing. It's how fast money churns through the system. So I go and I buy dinner at a restaurant. That restaurant pays the employees and pays the suppliers for food. Those people get paid. They go buy stuff, and so on and so on and so on. What's broken there is that the businesses are closed, half of them, and the banks aren't lending to the businesses, and they're not giving out loans for even real estate. It's getting harder. And so all those impactful parts of the economy that require those bank loans are going to start to suffer. So as a result, everybody's going to start hoarding their cash again. So now people are sitting back like, well, I bought my Xbox, but I'm a little bit nervous because I can't find a job and the stimulus is lower. I'm going to hoard my money. So now that's going to lead to a little bit of deflation. The other thing that leads to deflation is that businesses don't have the money to spend. So everybody's sitting there, they don't have as much money to spend, but everybody went and made more goods because there was such demand 6 months ago. And when they could make stuff, now they have a surplus and they have to lower prices, which leads to deflation because they got to move stuff. They can't just sit there with all this inventory. They got to sell for whatever they can, because either it's perishable, like food, or something else that's not going to last for a long time, or it's something that they overpaid for and they need that capital. So like businesses need working capital every 6 to 8 weeks. They need more money just to keep rolling because they run a very tight budget. So when they don't get that influx of capital, they have to lower prices to sell things. I go back to lumber. Lumber, there was a huge shortage. Everybody was working on home projects in 2020 because they were home. So they would go to Home Depot because it was open. They could get some lumber. They could build that deck, build the kids a swing set or a tree house, something. They would build that addition because they had that money. They were bored at home. There's something to work on. So there was a huge demand for lumber. So the price went up. And now people saw that. So the price went up. People started producing more lumber because, hey, lumber is really making a lot of money. I want to go create more lumber and more 2x4s, sell them to Home Depot so they can sell it because it's a huge profit margin. Well, fast forward 6 months from that, now we have a surplus of lumber because people aren't buying as much. Prices have to come down. That's a deflationary event. So we've already seen it. We've already seen 2 of these 3 phases already in the lumber section. So now third phase comes out, and that is the hyperinflation. And that's a little bit more complicated to explain, but we're going to see. We've seen in other countries. We haven't really seen it in the US, maybe in a long, long time. So probably Great Depression is probably the last time we've seen it. But the way that works is that the government wants to inject more money into the economy because banks aren't doing it. So they're going to bypass the banks. And the way they're going to do that is the central bank digital currency and the universal basic income system. And let me explain that a little bit further. So If banks aren't willing to lend, the government has to find a way to get money into people's pockets. So imagine an app on your phone where you actually were given stimulus directly on your phone. You didn't have to even go through a bank. You have a new digital currency, but the catch is you have to spend it. So this is essentially universal basic income, which is, it really came to the forefront in a major way about a couple of years ago when Andrew Yang was out campaigning for the Democrats, and he got a lot of coverage because one of his main platform planks was universal basic income. So this is the idea of giving people money every month. It's modern monetary theory. Just print your way out of debt. So you give money. Let's say you got $3,000 a month on your app, but the catch is you have to spend it, and it could be that it could be like a minus 10% interest rate every month, so that you're giving $3,000. Next month it's only $2,700, and so on. If that's not going to work, they might up it and say, if you don't spend it in 30 days, we're taking it back or it's gone. So now you're incentivized to go spend. Now that introduces more money into the system, more into the economy, and it stimulates spending. But now you've added all this extra money into, or currency, into the economy. So prices are going to go back up, and they're going to go up higher and higher and higher, and they're going to hyperinflate. So appreciating assets are going to absorb this inflation, and that's talking about the precious metals, gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. So I think that this theory is pretty solid. I think that's what we're going to see. We're already seeing 2 of the 3 phases already in some sections of the economy, like lumber and home improvement goods, but we haven't seen it everywhere yet. We're starting to see the inflation hit in gasoline. We've seen it at the grocery store. We're starting to see it in a lot of places, but we haven't seen the deflationary event yet. So when you start to see the deflationary event where people are kind of hoarding money and prices start to come down, be forewarned. You heard it here. You've heard it from the Economic Ninja. You've heard it from Mike Maloney. There's 3 phases. There is inflation, deflation, then hyperinflation. Be prepared. So what's my take on all this? What is my take on all this economy stuff and how it's all going to play out? Wouldn't everybody like to know? I mean, I've got my own opinions. It's going to change and evolve over time. It's just naturally that's how it's going to be. But I think the closest thing, and the reason I closed with the dollar Whippet theory, or the inflation, deflation, hyperinflation, I think that's the closest thing that's going to be to what I think is going to happen. So how do you prepare? Well, stock up on goods, buy things when you can, buy things that are before the prices go up. Just get prepared. If you have extra money if you're going to spend and you buy some durable goods, and just, I don't want to say become a prepper, but I'm just saying, like, if you think that prices are going to go up, it may not be a bad idea to go ahead and stock up on some food, some things that you are going to use anyway in the next 3 to 6 months. Go ahead and stock up on it, because you're going to use it anyway. And there's no harm done if you have it now. At worst, it's probably you're just buying it on the cheap. You're buying it at a discount, because prices are probably going to head up, because we're going to see supply chain issues. It's pretty much, there's no question about that. Everywhere I turn, I hear about it. We've already seen it in new cars, that there's not as many new cars. It's going to continue. So just don't go crazy with it, but be prepared for it. Now, secondarily, how do you prepare for your economic standpoint? And that's where you buy appreciating assets. And I think that there's a lot of credibility by saying that get involved in precious metals. Gold and silver could certainly appreciate. And again, this is not financial advice. This is just my opinion on how to react to these theories that I'm hearing be kicked around. I'll go back to the original theory of the dollar milkshake theory. I think that's flawed, because Brent did not consider other assets or other asset classes being able to take care of the issues of the dollar debt, or leaving the dollar debt system. And that's what gets back to, it all comes back to cryptocurrency, because it's the most sound money we have, and it's the best thing we've had in the last hundreds of years, because it's a trustless system, and it's an appreciating asset because it's a fixed supply and it's deflationary. So as more and more events lead are by governments that try to preserve their fiat currencies, which are dying before our eyes. And we've never lived in a world without the US dollar, but fiat currencies only last on average 28 years. So could this be the death of the petrodollar? Could this be the death of the euro and other currencies that are out there? Could, as Michael Saylor puts it, could Bitcoin become the apex currency, an apex asset, the dominant force that's out there in the economy? Could very well happen. So fortunately for you, you know about cryptocurrency and you're able to react to this and take that fiat and move it into appreciating assets just in case. So there's definitely a lot of reasons to be involved in cryptocurrency. And I laid out 5 different episodes here about economics and all the reasons to be involved. Many people get involved in cryptocurrency, from Bitcoin to Cardano to other assets that just appreciate over time. They chase the dollar. They're chasing that price appreciation. But what the underpinning of the trustless system, the fact that this is the most sound money that mankind's ever had, because we don't need to have any faith in a government to make it for us, or trust that they're not going to clip the corners of the coin or create a fiat system instead of actually using true value to back the currency. We don't need to trust them anymore. So with all this studying I've done, it wasn't just for fun. It was to better understand why cryptocurrency, not just because Bitcoin went from $1,000 to $50,000 and it's going to head to $500,000 or more. I firmly believe that. There's no doubt that I believe that, and that's why I pretty much built my career now around cryptocurrency. It's not just because of price appreciation or that it's going to go up against the US dollar. It's because I believe it's the only true asset class to really be involved in and preserve wealth. And it's going to be it's not just the apex predator of currency, but of all assets, because it's the only asset class that we know exactly how much there is, and we have pretty much total visibility of the control of it. And it's not dependent upon most anything else. So for those reasons, I believe that cryptocurrencies are way out of this mess, and we don't need these agencies. I'll say it that way because of the platform I'm on, but we don't need these agencies and these third parties to manage our money for us. We're willing to do that on our own, be a little bit more sovereign ourselves, control our wealth, control our future. So that's my theory of economic relativity in 5 easy steps. Hopefully you got something out of this. If you appreciated this, I appreciate some feedback. I put a lot of time and effort into these videos, especially this series. Leave a comment, like and subscribe. Please share the video. It would much appreciated for the channel. Still trying to grow it. I want to get the word out of what's going on here, because the reason I did this is not just that people can understand to get into this because of price appreciation, but the why behind it, the economic factors that are in play, and that if you're front running all of this, you could be way out ahead. And don't worry about the FOMO, the fear of missing out. Everybody's going to feel that. And whenever you get into a new space, you will find veterans that have been in there for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And like, wow, I wish I had known about it back then and got in. Well, it was probably very difficult back then. And there's been a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, but you're still early. There's still a lot of economic factors going on. Learn about it, teach it, preach it, live it, and learn it. So with all that said, I'm going to close the drawer in the bureau on both this episode and the 5-part series, and I'll see you next time.